everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad to see that we've got already about 30 people attending, which is awesome to see. Um, so just happy to see you all joining the live Q&A and community discussion after the screening of Can You Hear Us Now? We would like to ask everybody to put their name and pronouns in the chat so folks know how to refer to you, your location, and also where you're tuning in from and how you're doing tonight. And just so that we can see who everybody is and get connected here. I'll pop that into the chat quickly to show you guys what you should all put in there to intro yourself. Alrighty. So to get started tonight, I'd like to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about why this issue matters to me. My name is Jade Livingston, and I'm the regional organizer with Progress North. I grew up in Bad River in Ashland County in very northern Wisconsin. Bad River is one of the reservations up here, so I'm Native American and Anishinaabe. And our reservation is riddled with generational poverty. Most of the time, having anything beyond basic needs was a luxury, and sometimes having all of your basic needs met was a luxury in itself. I've watched my family and community work hard to better their lives, and it never seems to be enough. Without living wages and facing high costs and low availability of childcare, healthcare, housing, and everything else that people need to survive, many of the people that I grew up around in my community wind up with a lot of debt that they can't pay off, which makes it even harder to support their children or their aging family members. Affording college, owning a home, affording to have a family, or even leaving the reservation seems like pipe dreams for a lot of the people I grew up around. As I reached adulthood and started spending more time and working in the bordering rural towns, I realized that these aren't problems that are being faced just on my reservation. They run far deeper, and a majority of my county and region are struggling. Not only are they struggling, but they've been speaking up about it. I see my community members voting, becoming advocates, and creating change in anywhere that they can. And despite being told that we are part of a democracy, and despite all of the hard work that rural Wisconsinites have put in, people are still suffering because our legislators won't listen to us. So that's just part of the reason why I'm here today, to help raise awareness about the issue of gerrymandering and to support fair maps in Wisconsin. I'd like to acknowledge Susan Peters, the film's producer, who was instrumental in getting the screening and panel organized for Northern and Western Wisconsin, as well as our other co-sponsors and organizers. We have Barbara Peterson from AAUW River Falls, Maureen Ash from Pepin Pierce County chapter of the Wisconsin Farmers Union, and Jenelle Ludwig Krause of Pierce County for GrassRoots organizing. They've all done so much work to bring this screening to us all and this discussion to our region. And another shout out just to all the other local organizations that helped us promote the event. Over the next hour, you'll hear a wide range of voices speaking on the issue of gerrymandering. We'd like to include you all in the conversation. So please submit your questions in the Q&A box. If you can do this with your name, or you can do this anonymously. If you'd rather speak your question, you can use the raise your hand option, and a little hand cartoon, hand emoji will pop up on your screen, and we'll make sure that we get to you and let you speak your question. And then feel free to use the chat to discuss anything else. First, I'd like to introduce and hear from some folks from the film. Jim Cricchi directed Can You Hear Us Now and is joining us with his co-producer and wife, Susan Peters. This is the second film that Jim and Susan have made in Wisconsin. Their last film, Los Lecheros, was mainly filmed around Pepin and looked at dairy farms and their reliance on immigrant workers. And we're happy to have them join us tonight. Susan and Jim, take it away.
Thank you very much, Jade. I hope a lot of people in your community get to see the film. And thanks to everyone for watching the film and taking the time to have this conversation with all of us. It's important to Susan and I to share the film with as many people in Wisconsin as possible. So to have the 4 organizations come together like this is fantastic. I'll quickly give some background on how the film was made. Susan and I, as filmmakers, are drawn to what's going on in people's lives, much more than just making films that are strictly issue-based. So in 2018, we started filming people we were meeting in Wisconsin who were politically engaged, because we knew that would tell a story of what was happening in the state during an interesting election year. But we were filming without really knowing the big picture of how it was all going to come together. And as we started editing the film, we couldn't make clear about, we couldn't make clear what our main subjects were doing without giving more context to their lives and what they were going through. So we had to go back and look at the issues that have shaped the state over the past decade. And we added historical footage from over the years and a few maps and charts, something we hadn't really planned on doing, but it really helped tell a story in a much clearer way. And it became a much bigger story because interesting things continued to happen after the election. And we were able to include all of that.
So can I just jump in once? So I think since we're focusing on gerrymandering tonight, I wanted to just say a couple of words about parties and partisanship. Our film looks at Wisconsin, which, as you know, at the moment has a Republican majority in the legislature. But there are a lot of pretty powerful stories across the country and across history, even in Wisconsin, where the parties are reversed, but the gerrymandering and its impact are the same. So we think it's really important to be thinking about gerrymandering as a fundamentally nonpartisan issue because it impacts everyone regardless of party affiliation. And if you've seen the film, you'll know that it doesn't end with any solutions. As Jim was just saying, we kind of saw our role as looking at where we are now and showing the context and the history of how we got here. And so that's why we're excited to be a part of tonight's conversation in particular, to learn from this great group of speakers who are doing the actual hard work of finding solutions. And that we've had over 250 people join the screening says a lot about the community's focus on the issue. So I think that's really exciting. And I think that's it. We're just looking forward to hearing from everybody. Jim, do you have anything else?
No, I don't have anything else to say. Just thank you very much. And we will stick around through the conversation if there are any questions at the end. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan and Jim. Thank you for stressing the importance of this being a nonpartisan issue and how much support that we've seen in our area for this. And thank you for creating the film. That is just, I just think it's an incredibly powerful film. I think it's an important tool for the work that we're trying to do. And yeah, so thank you all. Next, we'll hear from, excuse me, Sheila Plotkin. As you saw in the film, Sheila is the founder of the website We the Irrelevant. We saw in the film, Sheila, how you were able to show that legislators were voting against the desires of their constituents. You gathered a lot of data through Wisconsin's open records law. Can you recommend strategies on how the rest of us can keep pressure on our legislators and hold them accountable?
I can certainly try. Thank you and good evening. Thanks for asking me to be here. And thank you all for the work you're doing on behalf of Fair Maps for Wisconsin. Contacting your legislators on issues you care about is really the best tool for influencing their actions. While it's true that gerrymandering allows the majority to ignore you, should they choose to do so, not contacting them is in effect a surrender to the gerrymander. Without real competitors, majority legislators feel free to do as they like. The goal of We the Irrelevant has always been to prevent them from doing so in the dark, behind closed doors. In addition to emailing or phoning your legislators, let me recommend that you take data from We the Irrelevant to town halls and other meetings with legislators and fellow constituents. Your neighbors should be aware of that data, and your legislators should be asked to defend the ignoring of hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites. There's a lot of data at We the Irrelevant, which will be most useful to you. That really depends on the point you want to make. I think that my most recent project, wherein I combined all of the correspondence that legislators received and the votes that they cast, is probably the best summary. And you will find it at the website under the How Did They Vote tab. I believe it will be worth your time. Let me share the grand totals with you. Bear in mind, these totals exist because of gerrymandering. Between 2015 and 2019, I sent a total of 10 open records requests to members of the Wisconsin State Legislature asking for citizen correspondence on proposed legislation of considerable public interest. I wanted to know how many contacts were in favor and how many opposed. And here's the result of adding it all up. The raw numbers are 651,465 contacts opposed, 11,275 in favor. That's 98% of the contacts that legislators received. They were opposed to the proposed legislation, but most all of the bills passed. That is not representative government. That is the raw power bestowed by the gerrymander, and it is steadily and rapidly eroding what's left of our democracy. Grassroots action, all of you, is the only way to defeat this monster. What you are doing will make a difference, but only if you keep doing it. Bob Follett once said, democracy is not an election, it's a life. And you are all living it, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I think it's very important to remind ourselves that there is data out there that can show us exactly how our legislators are ignoring us. That it's not just a guess. It's not something that it's not just a narrative that people are pushing, but this is something that's actually happening, and something that we can see. And then up on the screen here, thank you again, Sheila. Up on the screen here, from what Sheila just said, we can see some of these numbers. 72% of Wisconsinites support nonpartisan redistricting. We've seen that in many counties where there are referendums and such being passed, that they're in right-leaning counties. 75% of Wisconsinites support expanding special education funding, and this was voted down. 70% support adopting expansion of Medicaid, and this was voting down. And 81% support increasing background checks for firearm sales, and they refused to take a vote. All of this information is from the Marquette Law School polling, so you can go find this information as well. But these numbers are very helpful in showing exactly what is going on in our state.
You're on mute, Jade.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was muted. So moving on now. we will see, now that we've seen some of the solid numbers and how gerrymandering affects the actions of our lawmakers, we can now take a look at how it's affecting us and people where we live. Phil Verges is a longtime no-till farmer who grows corn, soybeans, and hay. He's lived in Pierce County since he was 10 years old. He and his wife Judy have 3 grown kids, and he currently serves as the Gilman Town Chair, has been on the WestCat board for a board of directors for a number of years and is its current president. And he's also on his local church council and leadership team for Pierce County GrassRoots organizing. Welcome, Phil. With that level of community involvement, you must see some of the ways that gerrymandering impacts us on a local level. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, well, thank you, Jade. It's an honor to be here tonight. First, I must say how impressed I was with the film and especially the work of Sheila. My goodness, the data that she's putting out, we should be shouting from the rooftops, I think. I'm definitely going to look into that more. I've had the privilege of serving as on our town board for the last 8 years, the past 4 years as town chairman. And I've really learned a lot about roads. That's one of the primary functions of town boards in the rural areas. And for an example of how gerrymandering is affecting us, especially here in the rural areas, the Wisconsin Towns Association is the organization that kind of lobbies for and supports local town government. They've got all kinds of metrics on the severity of our crumbling infrastructure. There are a lot of different measurements out there, but in most of them, Wisconsin ranks near the bottom in the quality of our roads, especially if you take into account rural roads. When we look at taking care, maintaining our rural roads, I kind of liken it to, taking care of the shingles on the roof of our homes. If our shingles start going bad and we ignore it, they keep getting worse and worse. We keep pushing it off. Before long, you have a leaky roof and you have a lot more problems. It costs a lot more money to take care of things. So it's important to have the proper maintenance and be proactive in things like road construction and maintaining our roads. We've had so many years of neglect. Actually, in some rural areas, some of the paved roads are being turned back into gravel roads because there's not the money to maintain them. We haven't fallen into that yet here in my township, but we do worry about that. And the solutions aren't all that difficult. We need more revenue. And the polling shows strong support by the citizens for increases in things like gas tax and even registration fees. And this is something that's the legislators have refused to take up. The ideology of not raising taxes has been there for so long that they just refuse to deal with that. So that's where the gerrymandering is having a huge effect in the deterioration of our roads and infrastructure. As a local government official, it's my duty to be a good steward of our resources and to maintain our infrastructure. So it's really difficult when you just don't have the funds to do it. A lot of times in the rural areas, it ends up being a shift to the local property taxpayers as we try to find ways to come up with more funding to do the best we can to maintain our roads. So this is kind of an example of how gerrymandering can affect the quality of life, especially in the rural areas here. We have deteriorating roads and infrastructure, and many times we end up with higher property taxes. So that's what I'd like to share to begin with here tonight, and thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Phil. I think it's really important to think about not only is it affecting the roads, but once it affects the roads and that's not being dealt with, it also winds up falling on the backs of taxpayers, like you said. It just brings to light how many different ways this is affecting people in our local communities. And now that we've heard a little bit about how it's affecting us locally, after we've heard about the effects on our legislators' actions, we're going to go back to someone from the film. From the film, we have here Jenny Estrada tonight. We saw Jenny run for state assembly in the film. Since then, she started a nonprofit called Crusaders of Justicia and Justicia. Sorry, I hope I said that right. And has been providing food to dozens of low-income families in Manitowoc, Green Bay, Sheboygan, and Appleton during the pandemic. Jenny, given your perspective on both politics and humanitarian work, how do you think that gerrymandering has had an impact on how our legislators have responded to the pandemic?
Well, first of all, thanks for allowing me to be here tonight. You did pretty well with the name. It's Crusaders of Justicia, which is justice in Spanish. And I think the better question is the lack of response. We saw because of gerrymandering, a lot of our legislators refused to meet. And in fact, they only decided to meet when they were up to fight our governor to remove the mask mandate. And all while nonprofits and organizers out here on the street were struggling to scramble our resources to feed. We're still feeding over 3,000 families a week. So we just see that we're continually getting ignored. And then you have something like the stimulus package coming through and leaving out 3 million mixed status families. Even in a place like Manitowoc County, we have the highest concentration of CAFO farms. So if we're talking about the rural, even still the rural effect, and what gerrymandering does to the rural areas. I mean, a good 87% of our workforce on our dairies are undocumented, and they got left out of the stimulus package. So, continually being ignored, we're looking at the issues impacting our communities. And, we're here at Crusaders just trying to organize to not just treat just like the symptoms of always being forgotten. So it goes farther than, just voting. It's our everyday life. I think the most important thing was educating people about gerrymandering. I saw a couple of comments, saying we can't stop. And that was the whole reason why we started Crusaders of Justicia, because I thought, well, what can I do while I'm in waiting to continue to run? Because it's all about educating. We're taking this advantage that, even while everyone was shut down during the pandemic, including our legislators who didn't want to come out and do anything, it took us grassroots organizers to continue to stay out in the street and use this time to be able to connect with those people and with our people and say, okay, we're getting ignored. We're going to continue to get ignored, and situations are getting worse while they're continuing to collect a paycheck. Here at Crusaders of Justicia, we're organizing collections for funerals for families that can't afford to bury their loved ones because of COVID. We're still continuing to do doorstep deliveries of food to our elderly community that can't come out, and to people that are COVID positive. And this is all the result of being ignored. We have the added benefit of connecting with Wisconsin Hunger Task Force, and we're in 72 counties and 10 tribal nations right now to continue to feed the community. I mean, in a state like Wisconsin, not being able to provide, our families not being able to provide food shows what our leadership is made of, right? If we're going hungry in the state of Wisconsin with all of our dairy farms, it truly shows what our leadership is made of. And it's not that the people don't care, it's that what Sheila said is we continue to get ignored. So now it's about keep going, and what do we do from here? And it's to keep fighting. And I mean, at least I'm committed to keep fighting whatever it takes. But I think that if anything that came out of this pandemic, and I talked a little bit with Susan about this, is that we really saw the people that maybe didn't know much about gerrymandering, didn't know much about government, they truly saw what our government was made of, our local government and our state government was made of during this pandemic. And it was a sad show that taking up the mask mandate, if it was, should we wear a mask or not, was the most important issue for our legislator. I think we have a lot of work still to do. So I'm glad that everybody enjoyed the film, and Susan and Jim, you did an amazing job. And I'm glad that it's still continuing to educate people on the issues here. because as you saw when I started, I didn't know about half the stuff impacting us and how hard it was. I knew only a little bit, but I'm still continuing to educate people along the way, and hopefully inspire other people to run and know that, you know, we all have a voice, and it's our duty to use it.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you just for sharing the insight, and also for all of the work that you've been doing before the pandemic and after. I think that it's really important for us to continue educating folks. I think that is the big thing. I think once they realize what's going on, it's easy to move on from there. And I think the hard part is that so many rural Wisconsinites just don't know that this is what's happening, don't know that our legislators are really ignoring us as hard as they are. So thank you again. Now that we have talked about the problem about gerrymandering, about how it's affecting us locally and kind of statewide, before we take a look at how we as community members can create change, we're going to look at two ways that Wisconsin is already working towards making the change. These two ways are with the People's Maps Commission and the legislation. Senator Jeff Smith is here. He was born and raised in Eau Claire, worked with his father, and then ran their window cleaning business for 30 years. He's been serving the people of Wisconsin for over 20 years, first on his town board, then in the assembly, and now in the Senate in District 31. Jeff, or Senator Smith, we're going to hear from Commissioner Tony Phillips on the People's Maps Commission in a minute. But before we get to that, can you talk to us about what you as a legislator are able to propose to create a better redistricting system?
Sure. And yes, Jade, I do go by the name Jeff, so that's just fine with me. Yeah, I feel like I'm a poster child of all this too, by the way, but but you've heard enough stories from others that are inspiring. And so I'm in a position now in the state Senate to what I call unfinished business from my time in the assembly, when we had an opportunity, as has been well documented, to make that change, and it didn't happen. So this is the way I consider leaving behind something I can be proud of, and that is restoring democracy by bringing back fair districts. So we have the legislation, which most people are really very familiar with. We model it after the Iowa version, but there are differences so that it fits closer to what how Wisconsin is geographically, politically structured, and all of that. So, but it would work very much like what the People's Maps Commission is now doing, and I am so proud of our governor who stepped up 2 years ago in his budget and announced that he was going to form this commission, which I was on the floor and just jumped up and started screaming and applauding, because he surprised us all with that, and it was bold and it makes a lot of sense. So though it will not probably be recognized by the majority party in power, because power corrupts, as we know, and they're going to do their own thing, but it gives us something to fall back on. We're being proactive. So and I won't steal the thunder of your next speaker, but it's important to know that is happening, and it is like this base of what we do in the legislature, what I do, and others who are crusading for a change in the law, that this is how it'll work. They're giving us this demonstration, and that it can work. And so we will be, so we've been holding off, we've been holding out introducing this. I made a mistake of telling people, I'm going to do this right away. I'm going to do this right away at the beginning of the year. But we had lots of conversations with the governor's office, and because he was going to introduce pieces of this in his budget, which he did 2 weeks ago, we wanted to let that play out. It gives us an opportunity to talk even more about these changes and giving the majority party an opportunity to actually accept it in the budget that he has, which we know they won't. They're going to throw this budget out. And when that occurs, we will be introducing the bill then as a standalone piece of legislation. And we have been, and I have a great new partner on the assembly side in Representative Jeb Andraka. She actually campaigned on this issue and won and flipped a seat, which surprised a lot of people. And she's just phenomenal. And so she's working on the assembly side and me on the Senate side to try to get co-sponsors or co-authors as we get into releasing this bill. And so I'm just going to be right out front, blunt with you that this year, even though we had 5 Republicans with us in last session, so far we've only been able to get one of those 5 to suggest that he might sign on with us. And we don't even, of course, it actually happens. We can't say 100% that'll happen. There's some, I guess, some logic to that on their side, because of course we're going to be in the courts. They're going to be in the courts at some point when maps are presented and then vetoed. We just, the likely scenario is that what that happens. And so on the majority side, they don't want their members on a bill that might make them look bad in court. So I can see why they probably are really working hard to keep their members from signing onto our bill. That doesn't help, right? That does not help. And I'll give you, and finally, I'll just give you one story I like to tell people that is an actual moment in time from last session. And as was already mentioned, that our leaders or our majority party decided they weren't going to do anything for 300 days while people suffered through this pandemic. But one of the last session days, I tried to amend a bill with a very practical solution to broadband. Using broadband, that we should be nonpartisan on this issue because we obviously have to get this done. And so I on the floor, I tried to amend a bill. And always when you amend a bill, what we're accustomed to as a Democrat is the majority leader will stand up and say, I move to reject the bill, and then we have a vote on rejection. We never do vote on the bill. Well, so I got done with my speech. I sat down expecting him to stand up, which he did. I wasn't even looking at him, and he hesitated. So then I looked up and he was looking at me and he says, the senator has a pretty good idea there. And I thought, oh, maybe this is the time. And then he followed that with, but I reject anyway. That's where we are in a world of gerrymandering as this real life example. And you already presented some examples on the chart there, but that's a real life example of something that absolutely has to be addressed for the greater state of Wisconsin, because they don't have to the voters, they don't care, and it's all political rather than what our real needs are. And I'll leave you with that because you need to know that you have your work cut out for you, and everyone on this call are wonderful, fantastic. Do not walk away from this issue. It is the issue that is going to define our generation and generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Senator Smith. Just thank you for the insight around the legislative environment on this issue in our state. Moving on, we'll hear from Dr. Anthony Phillips. He has spent his career as an oncologist. Seeing the deep lack of cooperation in the government, he was curious about the cause and learned about gerrymandering. He now serves as a commissioner for the People's Maps Commission in the 8th Congressional District. Dr. Phillips, can you tell us about what the commission does and why you wanted to be involved?
Okay, thank you, Jade, and thank you, Susan Peters and Jim Cricchi, for that amazing film. And you know, this is the largest Zoom I've ever been a part of. It's wonderful, this event tonight. So it's, but let me tell you about what the commission is doing, because we're trying to offer a kind of a solution to everything we're talking about tonight. A lot of you know some of this. Governor Evers initiated the commission. 9 commissioners were chosen last summer, 1 from each congressional district, 2 in the 4th Congressional District of Milwaukee. We've held virtual hearings in each of the congressional districts. Our last one is tomorrow in the 2nd Congressional District. Each hearing consists of expert testimony for about 60 minutes from various experts in the field of gerrymandering, legal, technical, maps, effects at the county clerk level, even some politicians. Then we take public statements for about 90 minutes at each congressional district hearing. And also the public is submitting comments. And I know that we have over 300 or 400 comments so far and documented. We're keeping track. One thing I want to report tonight, which has not been talked about, yes, we hear a lot about how politicians are not responding. We hear that all the time. But one thing that we're learning, that was a lesson for me, and I've read about it more, is the excessive splitting of the municipalities and the counties in 2011 for no reason except for partisan benefit. Hearing after hearing, we're hearing examples of this. Dunn County split into 4 assembly districts. The relatively small city of Grand Chute near me used to have 1 assembly district, now 3. Example after example of this, and it dilutes the effect of the counties and the cities and the local voters at the state level. And I would say to all of you, please make this a message when you're out writing your letters to the editor, talking to politicians, because I think it's a, you know, that should hit home with both sides, right? I mean, who wants to see their counties and cities split like that? So I think that's definitely a bipartisan message. In 2011, there was no effort to think about communities of interest. Everything was about voter preference in 2011. The People's Map is making a huge effort to look at communities of interest. We might think of those as ethnicity or races, but also farmers, watersheds, school districts. We're reaching out to all those for input. So we're working with Professor Moon Duchin from Tufts University to help us draw the maps, to get her expertise. We are actually reaching out to the University of Wisconsin to see if there's graduate students that may actually help us draw the maps. I would just comment a little bit on the criteria that are preliminary right now. We're waiting until after the last congressional district to both finalize and publicize our map criteria. I would say that the criteria that we're using are definitely consistent with what Senator Smith is proposing in his legislation. It's also very consistent with what is being pushed by the FAIR maps. So I think it's important to know that this is like kind of a 3-prong advocacy. You know, we have to respect Voting Rights Act and nesting of assembly districts into the Senate districts. We are absolutely respecting municipal and county boundaries, respecting compactness, contiguousness, and then reaching out for communities of interest. We'll use communities of interest to make decisions when counties or cities do need to be split. Can we do it in a way that respects communities of interest? Everything is public and transparent. We are not using voter preference data. Now, I haven't said anything about competitiveness, partisan balance, and I know that everybody wants to think that's going to happen, and it will. The data suggests that if we respect counties and cities and compactness and contiguous, just the traditional things, it will restore to a very large degree competitiveness, partisan balance. And then at the very end, we will turn on some data. So if there are choices of maps that respect all of the previous criteria, we do have the opportunity to select those maps which further restore competitiveness and partisan balance. So another comment I'll make is about outreach. We're nearing the end of the hearing and meeting portion, or the hearing portion of our job. As I said, we're waiting for the last congressional district hearing, but then we're going to gear up our People's Map Commission website with our message. So please look for that. You know, we've been a little quiet, but we're going to start getting less quiet. And it's going to be very nonpartisan. That's another thing. We're very, very clear that we're nonpartisan. So far, we're on Twitter. We have the website. We'll be tweaking and modifying the website. Eventually, we'll be publishing a report about everything we've learned, about the maps that are drawn, and about the process that we went through. So hopefully it can be used in the future for future census. And I guess, you know, I came into this as a conservative. I lean Republican, but you know, I don't think government's the answer to all of our problems, but I agree that the gerrymander of 2011 has had a lot of negative impacts on the state. We should never, never, never allow gerrymandering again. So my message would be to all of you, let's remember this. I mean, I think we're saying the right things, right? That if the other side has a chance, they're going to pass nonpartisan redistricting. And I hope that's the case. Because I do think that what's going to occur here is we are going to draw very good maps. The legislature is going to draw maps that are going to be vetoed. It's going to go to the courts. I would hope that the courts will consider the maps of the People's Map Commission. I think the maps of 2022 will hopefully be better. It depends on the census delay and what can be achieved by next April, but hopefully the maps will be better in 2022. And I think some of balance will be restored. And so I think there will be an opportunity, hopefully in the next 2 to 4 years, where as we continue the momentum of all that you are doing, that really there might be a chance to get this nonpartisan legislation passed. And so let's all remember what we're talking about. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Now that we have taken a look at the legislative steps and the People's Maps Commission, now we're going to take a look at how we, the people, you in this call, can have an impact, a positive impact on the issue of gerrymandering. The maps are redrawn every 10 years following the census. I'm sure you all remember participating in the census last year. And with that data being finalized, the maps are being redrawn very soon, as you've heard numerous people say tonight. There's a window of opportunity here with the maps being redrawn that we as community members can take. With the census data coming in, banning gerrymandering and creating maps has become a high priority for a lot of folks. Our organization, as you can see, local coalitions and things like that. And we the people have realized that we have the power to make a difference. Here with us tonight, we have retired clinical psychologist, Dr. Irene Bugge. She's here to tell us more about how Wisconsinites are making their voices heard locally despite our gerrymandered districts. She lives in rural Wisconsin, Balsam Lake Township. During her career, she worked alongside women, adolescents, and adults as they claimed their lives back from eating disorders, trauma, and addiction. She found renewed purpose with St. Croix Valley League of Women Voters in Western Wisconsin for nonpartisan voting districts, where now she is working to raise awareness about gerrymandering in anticipation of the upcoming Fair Maps referendums on the county ballots in April. Dr. Bugge, can you please tell us what is happening around this issue in Polk County right now? Dr. Bugge, are you here?
You're on mute. Yep.
Oh no. Jenelle, are you able to, oh,
Am I unmuted now?
you're here.
Perfect. Jenelle, could you put up the slide that I sent to you? This slide kind of captures a small slice of what's going on in Polk County right now. We're gearing up for a Fair Maps referendum on the April 6th ballot. What you don't see in these slides is all the people power that went into getting that referendum on the ballot. The drama and excitement of learning late one evening in January, way after 10 p.m. at night, that the Polk County Board of Supervisors not only passed a resolution in support of fair maps, but decided to give voters an opportunity to have a voice on this issue by including the referendum on the spring ballot. We were absolutely ecstatic when we learned that. The slides also don't show all the Zoom meetings that members of Western Wisconsin for nonpartisan voting districts and the League of Women Voters of St. Croix Valley have had since that evening in January, and all the behind the scenes work that's going on, so much effort by so many. I'm just going to highlight a few things that have happened so far, and hats off to Western Wisconsin for nonpartisan voting districts. They have done so much work. They've already hosted 2 Fair Maps 101 Zoom sessions to educate voters about gerrymandering and nonpartisan redistricting. We've got one more scheduled for March 19. We've had about 20 participants at these Zoom meetings, and this screening of "Can you hear us now" is a part of that as well, which has been so well received and is so inspiring to me working in the field here. Momentum is really building here in Polk County and across the state. You may see in this slide here that some signs have been planted in the snow, and we're hoping that, well, actually the snow is melting and people have been instructed to plant them in the ground if it's not too frozen when the snow melts. And the large sign in the right-hand corner there, we're encouraging folks to vote for nonpartisan redistricting. Those signs are all painted and ready to go. And this sign happens to be in our poll shed, and it's going to be moved tomorrow. And we have high hopes that the frozen ground will thaw soon and they can be put up. By the way, that fellow in the slide is my husband, and he is a League of Women Voters member. Yes, we have both men and women in the league. 3 local newspapers agreed to publish an educational series on about articles on fair maps. And I have to tell you, people in rural communities read their newspapers and they read the editorial section. And the Osceola Sun features the first article of this series. They featured it on their front page. We were blown away by that. Both liberals and conservatives have written letters to the editor in support of fair maps. And that we're finding really encouraging too, that this issue is being described by them as a nonpartisan issue in those letters. Top corner, join our sign rally. The League of Women Voters are having sign rallies. They're beginning this Saturday. And the league is inviting the community to participate in these rallies. We're going to be masked and socially distanced, and we wave signs that read "End gerrymandering," "Fair Maps Now," "Vote Yes," nonpartisan voting districts, and we'll be standing on street corners. We're trying to cover as many towns in Polk County as possible. We're also launching a postcard mailing campaign and a phone banking campaign. The next 4 weeks are going to be busy before April 6th. We're hoping that the referendum will pass with a solid majority, 65 to 70%. We believe this will send a strong, clear message to the legislature that we want them to use a fair system for drawing new voting district maps. And I'd like to thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. What an inspiring group of people to serve on a panel with. Thank you for this time to tell you what we're doing in Polk.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Irene. I just want to take this time to thank all of our panelists tonight. That is the end of our panel discussion here. And now that we have gotten through everybody and asked our questions that we had prepared, do our attendees tonight have any lingering questions that they'd like to ask before we move on? And I do see there are a couple questions in the Q&A here.
Yeah, I can maybe read one real quickly. Jade, Steve from Rhinelander says, we had a referendum. This question maybe can go to Senator Jeff Smith. So we had a referendum in the city. 89% of the people voted for fair maps, yet our state representative repeats the lie that fair maps are unconstitutional. He continues to be reelected with a majority of over 60%. How do we move the ball forward?
I'm sorry, Jenelle, but Jeff isn't actually on anymore.
Jeff isn't here anymore. I will maybe address the unconstitutional part because, or maybe Commissioner Phillips, is that a question you would like to answer? Otherwise I can go ahead.
Well, right. I mean, it's not unconstitutional. I mean, the legislator just needs to approve the map. They don't have to draw the map. They can approve a map from whatever source. So the Constitution just says that they have to approve the map. So, you know, they say the legislators who do not want to see this change say a lot of things to sort of confuse that it's the legislator's job to draw the map, which it isn't. It's unconstitutional. They win all the elections because they have the better candidates. All of these things are just simply confusing, so they don't have to face, you know, what really is the answers they don't want to, you know, give. But I'll stop there.
Maybe one more question about the People's Map Commission. This was submitted ahead of time by Carol. Will Governor Evers' People's Map Task Force actually create maps?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going to create hundreds of maps. And at the end, we'll have a map for the congressional districts and then one for the Assembly and State Senate districts. And we will present that to the legislature. You know, the census data was supposed to come out in March. It may not come out now till September. It really compresses the whole process. I was actually personally hoping that Fair Maps would have kind of a big to-do surrounding the presentation of the people's maps to the legislature. And that might be something we all want to think about, because I think it's a big deal. You know, because these are the maps that in the future could have a lot of influence. But absolutely, to answer the question, we're going to draw very good maps that I think everybody will be very proud of, and they're going to be extremely nonpartisan. And hopefully, again, they have some influence at the judicial level in terms of the final solution.
Great, thank you. And it's a question for Sheila here. From Cindy, what do you do if your local representatives are not willing to respond to your emails and provide you with information on the communications that they have received from constituents? Do you threaten legal action because they are not following open records law?
It doesn't happen often. Let me start with that. Those who don't cooperate are in the minority. I've always been grateful for that. But the fact remains that some will find a way not to share the data. You can use the law. I have sued and they settled. That was all about getting electronic records rather than paper. And and they settled and paid my legal expenses. But what happens sometimes now, because the appeals court has said electronic records must be provided when they are asked for, which makes all kinds of sense. You're not copying thousands of sheets of paper. Those legislators who don't want to cooperate are more and more turning to charging fees. And the law gives them the option to do that. The law, they wrote the law saying that they get to choose whether to charge or not. I have never paid for a public record. That's an oxymoron. I have only paid when I needed them mailed to me because I was temporarily disabled. What do you do if they refuse? You keep pushing. You might turn to the press. You might decide to sue. But in the end, they get to decide. And they can tell you that they don't have the information anymore, which is entirely possible. They are permitted to get rid of things. Most of them keep contacts from their constituents. Their definition of constituent is you can vote for me. That's not my definition of constituent, because the decisions they make affect the entire state. So my view is we are all constituents, but that's a whole other argument. I think those are your options. You can try to embarrass them with a letter to the editor. Unfortunately, some of these legislators are far beyond embarrassment. I don't know if I don't think I have any other answer.
Thank you, Sheila. That's really helpful. I think I am going to pass the floor back to Jade so that we can have some wrap-up comments, but we're happy to stay later. I know there are still a couple questions, so we'll let Jade wrap everything up, and anyone who wants to drop off at 8 p.m. can go ahead and do that. And then anyone who wants to stay on a little longer will take some time to answer any other questions. And then we'll also be sending a follow-up email with a bunch of information. So hopefully everyone will get their answers they need. All right, Jade.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so now after all of this, we're moving on, and Jenelle, if you wanted to bring up the slideshow with the calls to action. So we would just like to ask all of you and let you all know in the ways that you can be involved and play a part in the support of fair maps and banning gerrymandering in Wisconsin. And the first is to follow the People's Maps Commission. Follow them to stay up to date. Tomorrow night, there is the last People's Maps Commission meeting for the 2nd Congressional District. That's at 5. You can go to their website and you can view past meetings from your district. You can still submit written testimony in support of fair maps. And so just follow up with the People's Maps Commission. You can go to the next slide, Jenelle. Next, you can contact your legislators, call your representatives, email your representatives. Make sure that they know that you are in support of fair maps. You want them to support fair maps. Just keep the pressure on. Going back to Sheila's point, even if you're not getting emails or calls back, there is still data that they are getting contacted. And so that's very important to make sure that we are still contacting our legislators, even if they don't tend to answer us back. You can go to the next one, Jenelle. Learn more at Fair Maps 101. So like we were just hearing, Fair Maps, or Western Wisconsin for Nonpartisan Voting Districts has been holding Fair Maps 101. What is gerrymandering trainings? The next one is March 8th to 18th at 7 p.m. And this presentation covers what gerrymandering is, what impacts it has in Wisconsin, what ways that we can create change and have fair maps, and how we can be involved. We'll get into it a little bit deeper than we have tonight. And then The next way you can be involved is joining a grassroots team. There are over 15 grassroots teams across Wisconsin. Many of them here, Pierce County Grow, Progress North, Farmers Union, and more. You can sign up and at the link that's been posted in the chat, and we'll connect you with the one that's nearest you, the team that makes the most sense for you to join in on. And the last thing that you can do is you can host your own screening of Can You Hear Us Now? I think that this is just a great tool to raise awareness about gerrymandering. It does a great job of explaining how deeply gerrymandering affects our communities, and to explain the political environment in our state. So if you wanted to host your own screening to get the word out and raise awareness, you can reach out to Susan Peters, the film's producer, to set up another screening in your area. And her email is going in the chat right there. And that is all that we have for you tonight. I'd like to extend a big thank you to everybody involved this evening. Filmmakers Susan and Jim, the film subjects Jenny and Sheila, Senator Jeff Smith, and our community leaders Phil, Anthony Phillips, and Irene. Thank you all for joining us, sharing your thoughts, and spending your Wednesday evening here with us tonight. Coming back to the title of the film, Can You Hear Us Now? We know that we have not been heard, but now is our window to make a difference. Let your voice be heard, speak up, take action. We'll be following up with you in the next few days with an email. There will be links to the People's Maps Commission, how to find your legislators and their contact info, the Fair Maps training, signing up for the grassroots team. All of the information will be in there, so just keep an eye out for that email. And then, yeah, also you'll be getting a follow-up email from Susan, the film's producer, with a little bit of information on the screening. And thank you all. Again, thank you everybody for joining us.